Welcome to the Dog Expert Podcast, the podcast dogs would want you to listen to. Powered by canineprinciples.com, helping passionate dog people go from feeling unsure and overwhelmed to confident, compassionate and science savvy through a rich library of online courses and formal qualifications. Each week on the podcast, we dive deep into the real, raw and rewarding world of dogs. This isn't about obedience. This is about understanding. Because dogs aren't problems to solve. They're free-thinking, sentient beings to connect with.
Hey!
Hello! How are you?
Hello! Welcome! Have you had a good week, Emily?
Oh, it's been good. Rainy, but good. After last week, I have sorted my headphones out, so I am fully prepared and full on excited for today's discussion.
Super excited. And wasn't the feedback wonderful from our first episode?
Oh, absolutely. It was for your first episode, it can be quite overwhelming, right? So I was so happy with all the positive feedback we received.
Yeah, absolutely. And some questions in as well and suggestions of what we can talk about in future episodes, which is super exciting. We have got some amazing guests lined up today, haven't we? We really do.
Like a kid on Christmas, my excitement is surreal.
You and me both. It's been a really quick week and it's come around so quickly, but at the same time it's gone really slowly because I've been so excited for the guest speakers that we have got on this week's episode. So do you want to tell people a little bit about what we're going to be talking about first before we introduce our speakers?
So today we're going to be covering emotions in dogs and how that plays a role in behavior, as well as the importance of how understanding their emotions can really help you shape the desired behaviors you're looking for your dog, and also understanding what they're going through. And I feel it's such an important topic because if you can understand from a different perspective instead of going to the thought of the dog's disobedient, the dog's not listening, and all those things in between, it actually brings that compassion into it. And it's the understanding is what helps us humans approach it in a much better way.
Exactly that. And the two ladies that we have got this evening coming on our podcast that we're delighted to host are absolute experts in all things dog, really. But let's introduce them. I can't keep it a secret any longer. So the two guests that we have got for you are Linda Michaels, who has got an MA in psychology. She's an author and speaker. She's rated one of the top 10 dog trainers in the United States by Top 10 magazine. Linda has conducted laboratory research in behavioural neurobiology, examining the interface between behaviour and the brain, and is the creator of the internationally acclaimed hierarchy of dog needs. Now, Linda has got a wonderful book. If you haven't read the book, I'm going to put the link in the comments. You need to get a copy of this book. It's called The Do No Harm Dog Training and Behaviour Handbook, which features the hierarchy of dog needs. So you don't need to get the two separately. It's all in the book. I'll pop the link in the comments so that you can find it easily. How amazing. The other guest speaker we have is equally as awesome. We have got Dr. Jessica Pierce, who's a faculty affiliate at the Centre for Bioethics and Humanities at the University of Colorado Anschutz Medical School. She's been writing and lecturing about the moral contours of human-dog relationships for over 15 years and is a leading scholar in animal ethics.
Amazing.
Oh, I'm going to put a link to Jessica's most recent book in the comments as well, so you can get that one. It's called Who's a Good Dog? She's published 11 books, including The Last Walk and Run, Spot Run, as well as hundreds of scholarly and popular articles. So I am going to introduce the ladies that are joining us now. Hello, Jessica.
Hello.
Hello. So
Hey.
nice to be here.
So glad you could join us. Hi, Linda. How are you?
Hi, everyone. I'm just delighted to be here.
Oh,
Thank you.
We're so glad you could join us, and we're really keen to talk about so many different things with you guys. So we're going to try and keep it on track of canine emotions. So I guess if we start maybe with you, Linda, if you don't mind telling us a bit more about what canine emotions are for someone listening who doesn't know.
Well, actually, when I was thinking about this question, what occurred to me about the science of emotions, if I can talk about that, is
Please.
the history of the science of emotions. So just briefly, I mean, most of us know that Darwin in 1871 talked about from his observations. You know, he wasn't data driven, but he understood. You know, we can see pain, pleasure, happiness, sadness, and fear in social and other animals. And what's really interesting about Darwin is, did you know that Darwin studied dogs?
Oh,
No,
I didn't.
I did
Oh, yeah.
not. That's amazing.
Learned that about 6 months ago. Yeah, he was like, he studied dogs, artificial selection, and he used and he was a dog lover, like a big dog lover. So I mean, like, one of us, you know. So
That's amazing.
so yay. So you know, we have like the evolutionary theory on the science of emotions, starting with Darwin, and then I was thinking about Dr. Bekoff, who, you know, he, so many of us are fans, and you know, in the field of ethology and animal behavior, and he talked about biology. And of course, you know, since the 1990s, researchers have known that dogs have patterns of attachment that are similar to patterns of human attachment. So then we have that's the, you know, the ethology part. And then Panksepp went on to study biology, the biology of hormones and neuromodulators. So he brought that biology piece and the physio piece, and then neuroscience. I mean, we have, you know, with Dr. Gregory Burns with the functional MRIs,
Yes.
observed activity in dogs and their connection with us, and discovered also that the same areas in the brain light up when a dog sees its person as light up when a human baby sees its mother. So,
It's
I mean,
phenomenal.
so many pieces historically. I just thought that was so interesting. You know, we've got it all now. So who can deny? In fact, Bekoff said, if I may quote, it's bad biology to argue against the existence of animal emotions.
100%.
So true. So true. And Jessica, if we can come over to you, and maybe you can share your perspective on how canine emotions fit with behaviour and how what they actually are.
Yeah. So, I mean, building on what Linda said, it's remarkable to me that that anybody ever asked the question, do dogs have emotions?
Yeah.
You know, instead it's what emotions do dogs have, and how are they experiencing those emotions? What's their lived experience of emotions? And for me as an ethicist, I guess the note of interest there is, what do canine emotions tell us about how best to live well with our companions? And of course, I guess the point being, we have to find ways to live with them that that respect their emotional lives, and that hopefully, I mean, the idea is with our children, we want them to be happy. Like,
Yeah.
and that doesn't mean there aren't some disappointments and difficult things in life, but overall arc of their lives is, we hope, happiness. And I think with dogs, it's similar. We want to, dogs experience a whole range of what a scientist would call affect, negative and positive affect or feelings, and trying to keep the balance on the positive side of that as much as we can. We can't protect our dogs from all negative emotions, negative emotional experiences, but we can do a lot to reduce the amount of negative experience that they feel in their daily life. And, in terms of what emotions are there, I mean, emotions have evolved to help organisms navigate their environment successfully, and basically to put it in the most basic terms, to say, a pleasurable or positive emotion is a sign that that's something to pursue, whether it's food, sex, whatever, love, things that are going to help you, that are going to be adaptive to an organism in survival, are things that are going to be associated with a positive affect. And likewise, the negative affect is linked to things that are dangerous, potentially going to shorten your life. And the emotions are, the limbic system is primarily, what is responsible for the emotional system in mammals, in animals. Yeah. And I think it's important to recognize that, evolution is a conservative process in the sense that, things generally, evolution does do things more than once, but it's going to, what I'm trying to say, let me say this in a different way that's less complicated. Human and dog emotions they're not the same, but they're very similar, and they have evolved along the same path.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's important for listeners to understand. I mean, that dogs experience the same basic range of emotions as we do. Dogs feel fear, rage, joy, love, grief, sadness, excitement, frustration, boredom. I don't think there's any scientific disagreement about those basic facts. I think where the story is a little more complicated and interesting is whether and to what extent and in what ways dogs experience more complex emotions like guilt or jealousy or shame. And my own sense is that the jury is out on that still, and they likely do. And we just don't understand very much about it. It's hard to study emotions in dogs because they can't talk to us in the language that we're used to. So we have to use what are called behavioral correlates, or basically, we have a pretty good idea that when an animal is doing X, it means they're feeling Y.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we can do that with some with pretty good precision, but I think it's also important to recognize that it's not 100%. We absolutely know what's going on inside the dog's mind. We're never going to know that. There's going to be some mystery there, which I love the idea that there's some mystery in our relationship with them. So recognizing at the same time, and then I will be quiet, that they feel the same things we do, and at the same time that their lived experiences of emotions are not necessarily the same as ours. So you can't just say, well, that makes me happy, therefore it's going to make my dog happy.
I agree.
it's not quite so seamless.
And there's the points that you brought up are just so important. I wish I could, there were like 4 points, but because there's lots that we want to talk about, I just want to briefly bring up 2. The one where you mentioned that, dogs feel the same. It just, the cognitive abilities differ, because of the species. And I also agree with they absolutely feel. You can't look at a dog in this day and age and tell me that they don't feel. They absolutely do. And they can even feel conflicting emotions. We see dogs that are excited or aroused when somebody enters the door in the home. However, they have that startle response of friend or foe. I want to greet you, but I'm not sure. Now I'm close to you. Oh, too close, changed my mind. And they can really go through such a vast amount of emotions in such a quick time. And to the point of what you're saying, the other point was we cannot protect them from everything. But what we can do, if we understand their emotional responses and how their emotions affect their behavior, we can actually give them the tools and the skills or life skills that they're missing to navigate, have emotional resilience, to recover much faster. All these things are so important when it comes to emotions, because if you have a confident dog, even if something awful happens to them, that confidence, you are most likely going to get a quicker recovery because you've got that connection, you've got that relationship, you've got that bond and that trust. And the bounce back would be a lot faster as well. And this is one of my most favorite topics of all time. And I wish I could say everything in my brain.
You say that about every topic that we've got. But if we just have a little look about how emotions show up in behaviour, because when you know what to look for, it becomes really clear that behaviour is emotion made visible, if that makes sense. What we're seeing, so you might see a joyful dog that is bouncy and wiggly and playful body language. You might see a scared dog that freezes or cowers or tries to take the flight option and attempts to flee a situation. A frustrated dog might become vocal or start redirecting that frustration to destructing something or even self-mutilation.
Yeah.
And they're not random things that are happening, they're expressions of their emotion, and it's really communication in motion.
Well, I found that one of the things that confuse pet parents and confused me before I started studying, the fascinating subterranean world of dogs and everything about being a dog nerd, was that a dog can, for example, the way an emotion shows up, a dog can either, in a state of fear, either bark and lunge or try to run away. So, but these are both expressions of fear, and it's interesting that that most of us and most of our dogs, when given the opportunity, would run away. It's adaptive to survival to run away. You don't want to fight; you could become injured.
Yeah.
So
It risks your life.
we have the dogs on a leash. They cannot run away. So often they're either going to maybe try to run up behind us, but that doesn't work so well. So they do like an offensive defense, bark
Yes.
lunge. And I just wanted, to mention that the way that I got involved in this field was my work in dog welfare at the Humane Society. And I know this is a topic that, we cannot separate what we're talking about from this is, the topic is really dog welfare, right? So in understanding emotions, we're going to be better able to, as Jessica was talking about, the different ways that we can understand more deeply, what is driving the behavior and looking at the emotions. And when I went to the Humane Society looking for a thesis project, what I saw was Panksepp's grief. And it was deep And as Emily said, just, looking into the eyes of these dogs, this bewilderment and fear and just being lost in the environment. It just struck me so deeply that I thought, oh my gosh, I could use my graduate training to try to help these dogs.
Amazing.
But that, grief is so real, and that abandonment, and we study all of, the attachment theories with, that relate to, that are similar with humans as they are with dogs bonding with humans, as humans, babies bonding to their mothers. So anyway, when I think about like bad behavior, most behavior is an expression of need. It's an expression of an unmet need or an undermet need. And so this is just so amazingly mind-blowing that when we look at what is the dog missing in terms of needs, we fill those needs, we often solve behavior problems. It seems like magic.
Yeah,
So true.
absolutely.
I just quickly share a sort of lived experience of that grief, seeing that grief in dogs. And Linda and I both very passionate about, well, I think we all are really, about helping dogs who are who were up for rehoming or who've been relinquished, or Linda and I were very blessed to go to Battersea Dogs Home and do a tour of Battersea Dogs Home and meet some of the dogs there. But I was called by our local police force going back a few years now, and asked to go and pick a dog up that the police had found with a deceased body. And the dog had been with its guardian with a body for 3 days without food, without anything, just literally lying with its guardian's body. I went and I put it in my van, and when I got it out at the other end at home, I got the dog out of the van and it lay down on the pavement and just froze completely. And there were people literally walking down with other dogs straight past it, and there was no one there. That dog was completely shut down.
Lights out, yeah.
Completely shut down. And luckily, a wonderful friend is a holistic vet. She does zoo pharmacognosy as well, and she brought out her zoo farm kit, and we were there for 6 hours before the dog was able to stand up and to start to come round. But that grief and that shock and
trauma, just
the trauma, and you can't tell me that dog wasn't feeling all sorts of emotions during that time, to get to the point where it was shut down, and while it was, its mind was just exploding. But
that's the thing, yeah. That's like you mentioned, you can't, for that dog to go through such a huge amount of feelings to the point where the brain goes, nope, I'm out, can't do this anymore, we need shut down, complete survival mode. And that's our primitive wiring, right? Or the primitive wiring. And you can't, it's so, your freeze, flight, fidget, fawn, faint responses that are involuntary, and you have not one individual mammal, like you mentioned earlier, is in control of this, because the brain goes, what's happening? You have your receptors, it sends the messages to all the right parts of the brain. And then when it's such a huge volume of feelings, it's just that switch off learned helplessness state.
Yeah.
And that is just awful, absolutely awful.
And I think your story, Joe, is a really good illustration that, I mean, I think one thing that bothers me about the way dog emotions are talked about or portrayed in the media is, like, dogs have emotions. They have fear, rage, joy, like these discrete emotional experiences. They can feel these things. But that that kind of overlooks the fact that dogs don't just experience emotions. They are emotional beings.
Yeah.
They are a complex of emotion at all time. And to
So
your
well
point,
put.
Emily, that it's often a really complex mix of emotions. And I mean, how many times has somebody said to you, how do you feel about this? And you're like, well, I don't really know. I feel a lot of things about it. You know, I feel happy and sad and, you know, grateful and angry, and dogs, there's no reason to think dogs are also not these very complex emotional beings. And we need to really be sensitive to, they're sensitive beings. And I what really upsets me, and sort of why I am why I've written so many books about this, but people are like, shut up about it already.
No one is saying that. Everyone's saying we want more.
I feel like dog owners, dog guardians, whatever you want to call them, are, and I think this is true for all companion animals, not just dogs, but cats, probably even worse for lizards and snakes. I mean, animals that certainly have emotions, but that are more difficult for us to relate to or understand. That the way we keep them as pets is emotionally traumatic and challenging for them. And we don't do a lot to compensate for that or help them adapt. We simply get mad at them for not being what we expected.
I love that, what you just said. We get mad at them for not being what we expected. Actually, Jess, I have a question for you, if you don't mind, on what you've just said. You know, dogs feel sad, happy, all these, let's say, basic line of emotions, right? And they are complex. And from what I understand and how I feel and experience is that, yes, they can feel all those things, but as human beings, because we have higher cognitive abilities, we can self-talk and rationalize and identify and pick, I feel sad because of X. This led me to do this. Maybe I've not been my best self lately because I've been super, super stressed. And all other experiences, genetics, which heighten certain emotional responses. I mean, it's like an endless topic, right? But when it comes to my dog's done this and we don't set them up for success and we get frustrated, it's not even just the lack of understanding, and not in a negative sense, it's also what's put out there that you guys mentioned earlier, what's always put out there in the media, in books, in reels, because everything's now in reels and you get this instant gratification of a 15-second reel and you're like, what? Look what that person did with that dog. That's amazing. Yeah. But they don't understand, but then they also don't see what happens behind the scenes. And when you actually understand dog body language and emotions and you can connect the two together, when you're watching that reel, you can see that dog is not happy. Yes, it looks amazing that this dog has complied and doing all these great things, but what's happened behind the scenes for that video is something very scary. And it's, you know, from the thought to, if someone could just refresh my memory to what that study was for the 2.5 to 3-year-old child, when we compare and go, yes, dogs are not little people in fur coats and they're not children. However, their emotions are incredibly similar to ours. And that as an adult dog wouldn't have more than a 2.5 to 3-year-old child. And it's a great way to help a person, a pet parent, guardian, like you said, understand, going, well, actually, I wouldn't do that to my child because I understand my child wouldn't understand that. I know that, and that would be stressful. And people tend to obviously do a lot more for their children because they connect more with their children because they are a species, they are human, and it's easier to understand. Whereas a dog, something falls, something misses. The good thing is, I think there are a lot more people in this day and age that are willing to do anything for their dogs. I'm so lucky with the clients that I've worked with here in New Zealand, even in South Africa. I'm not taking that away. I'm just saying as a behaviorist and trainer, I've been really blessed for the people who come through with me, that they just give it their all and they really apply the steps. But then before I see them, the knowledge they had prior was what could have been a huge influencing factor to the problem behaviors they're currently experiencing.
Can I
Oh
bring
my
it
God.
back to safety, though? Emotional
Yes,
safety, because I just feel that, like, if a dog feels safe, it feels seen, it feels heard, it's so much more capable of learning and adapting and thriving. Whereas when we're ignoring the emotions, which for decades with traditional dog training has been the case, it's all focused on, like
absolutely.
you say, the compliance or the obedience over actually understanding the dog's emotions and rewarding the behavior that we want to see more of, rather than punishing what might be perceived from a human perspective as bad behavior. We don't want to suppress the dog's emotional state. We want to promote that emotional safety so that they are able to express their emotions. And if they feel
Absolutely.
fear, because so many dogs go into learned helplessness where they give up trying to communicate because they don't feel that their communication's been heard by the humans around them. But the emotion doesn't go away, it just gets buried, really, doesn't it? It doesn't disappear, it festers.
But then you get the, oh, look how good they are. They're being so good at the grooming table, or they're walking so nicely. But it's that learned helplessness that you were saying. The dog is going, this is too much. I'm done. I'm just going to be still, because if I'm still, that increases my chances of survival. If I'm still,
There's
then
like
maybe I'll be okay.
tonic immobility. Emotional safety, I put on recently when I revised the once every 5 years. I separated emotional safety, and it's the first thing on emotional needs, from physical safety, because emotional safety is really probably the prime directive in our lives and in our dogs' lives. We are always first and foremost concerned with, am I safe? If we're not safe, or if we don't feel safe, it can be a perceived threat, can be every bit as much damaging as a real threat. So, for
Absolutely.
example, the beep of the shock collar, just the beep can send a dog into a state of panic. And it is just so damaging. If I just may speak for a minute, yes, by the way, Emily, I believe the 2 to 3-year-old toddler study was, again, Dr. Gregory Burns with the functional MRIs. He was looking at impulse control.
Yes.
He learned that dogs have approximately the same degree of impulse control as a toddler. And these analogies of parents to children and us to our dogs are so helpful. I found that's been a real breakthrough point in me being able to reach my clients, because there are so many comparisons that we can do and extrapolate the data from all the research we've done on animals and used it for humans. Let's take that research that we've done on animals and use it for the animals, for their benefit. I just wanted to remark on something Jessica said about the complexity of emotions, with a case that I just have never been able to get out of my mind. It was a little dog, I think a Chihuahua cross, called Jelly Bean. And when it was a fear case, when I showed up at Jelly Bean's house, that the pet mom told me, well, I can't let you in right away because she will go and hide between the refrigerator and the cabinet, and she won't come out. So we're going to meet you outside. So I said, good idea. Yes, let's do that. And then I kept my distance. And little Jelly Bean saw me. And of course, I had treats. And I said, hi, sweetie, how are you doing? And I was, down low and doing all the things that we're taught to do to appear less threatening. And you talk about body language and the complex emotions. This little dog, her body was like a U, an upside down U, and the ears flat. The eyes were bulging, but she went down on her stomach and she started crawling toward me, peeing, urinating all the way, because she was in such conflict between wanting to bond with me and being so afraid of a stranger. So yeah, there are, it's not just one emotion at a time. It's very, very complex. And if I just may say on the topic of expectations, and Jessica, please forgive me, but why is it that pet parents have like no expectations for cats? It's like, I mean, and we have these unrealistic, what we don't expect from dogs. It's like the world and more, and all
I love that point so much.
Yeah, isn't that so much messaging though? Like cultural messaging. Cats are their own people. The cat is your master, and dogs, dogs are a totally different experience. And I think that's a great point. And it's probably wrong on both ends. I mean, cats are far more, I wouldn't say like dogs, but far more willing to work with us. And just two notes on the things that we've been talking about. The issue of dogs as 2 or 3 year olds, I understand that scientifically. And I think what I also see is a danger of, and this is related to the issue of dogs feeling safe. When we infantilize our dogs and say our dogs are like 2 year olds, we then don't jump to recognizing that what dogs need is agency. And I know we're going to talk about this later, but as a teaser, to throw that word in there. And the reason dogs don't feel safe emotionally is because they have no control over their environment. Mm-hmm. They have no agency. And we need to not treat them like toddlers. We need to treat them like adults, and let them have some say over the contours of their life. And is worth maybe throwing in here one of the things that I often come back to in my writing and when I talk about dogs and human-dog relationships is that dogs are captive animals in an important respect. That is to say, dogs who live as pets, and that's only 20% of the dogs on the planet. Most dogs on the planet don't live under conditions of intensive captivity, or what I have started to call confinement regimes. And pet dogs live under such profound confinement regimes that it really affects their emotional lives. I mean, and if you look at the human literature on like solitary confinement and the psychological effects of imprisonment and captivity on humans, it's all the stuff you would expect to see. Just learned helplessness and hopelessness and depression and shutting down and, aggressive outbursts and et cetera. So recognizing that, from the very start, our dogs are struggling. It's a challenge for a dog to be a companion to a human in a home. And so rather than expecting dogs to meet us 80% of the way, and they do all the work, we do the training, they do all the work to become what we want them to be. Instead, it needs to at least be 50-50, if not, more. We need to meet them halfway, let them be dogs, let them be who they want to be, who they are, let them express their emotions, even if those are negative emotions, and have a partnership, not a boss.
I agree with that so much.
I always say
And
it's mate, we're on the same team. It's not
I
down
know.
to us, we're
yes,
together.
Sorry, I get very passionate about this, and I'm sorry if I.
You're in the
no,
right
this
room.
is why we're
You're
all
in the right
here. This is
room.
why we're all here. I would
Rhonda,
love to add to that if that's okay.
you
Oh,
know,
sorry,
avoid
Linda.
about that very tough subject, dogs as captives, and not having agency, choice, and not being able to give consent. Like, what gives people the license to just go run up and touch a dog? We don't do that with other people. Like, some
I know
people
you'd get
do.
arrested if you did that to somebody's child.
Yeah.
Pedo.
You know, we take these liberties, these unfair liberties. But one of the reasons that we do, from what I understand, is because we have bred bidability into dogs. We have artificially selected for dogs that are so bonded to us. And I mean, we can talk about a lot of, Stockholm syndrome. You know, we can take that in a lot of different directions about why it is that even when abused, dogs will continue to have like this domestic violence relationship with their abuser. But they're captives, as you said, Jessica. Where are they going to go? I mean, they literally, there's no domestic abuse hotline, like you were talking about cognitive functions and our ability to understand our emotions and think our way into a different response. It's much more basic with them. And
Yes.
so we have put them in this predicament, and it's our responsibility. It is the humans' responsibility to learn about these animals, to learn about their body language. What do they say? They're talking to us all the time, all day long,
Absolutely.
trying to tell us how they feel. They're also honest about their feelings. They wear their feelings on their sleeves, so to speak. So, and it's not that hard to learn.
Emily's laughing at me because I'm giving you a virtual high 10.
Absolutely. This is so good.
I think also, I'm building on that, the process of socialization that we undergo with when we get a puppy to basically to make them completely emotionally attached to and dependent on us. That's what a good dog is. And we like that. Like, the more attached and dependent they are, the better. That's not healthy for a dog, because that makes them, as you were pointing out, Linda, totally vulnerable.
And isolation, separation, distress. Oh.
And then, to punish a dog, we withhold affection. Like, how cruel is that? Like, you make a dog be attached to you and feel affection, and then say, no, I'm going to turn that off now.
That is so
meet my expectations.
Yeah, because the thing is, with associative learning and everything that happens in the dog environment, basing on with what you've just said now and what Linda said earlier about the lead restricting the dog's ability to engage or disengage from a perceived threat. So the perceived threat is from their perspective, right? Real or imagined. And even with you saying denied affection, how can a dog understand or associate what it is that they've done wrong?
And
it's not, it's because it will be things like, let's say, for example, with the lead, the dog is afraid of something in the distance. You've not noticed it, right? Their amygdala is going, oh, scary. And the dog responds accordingly. And that is part of their sympathetic part of their nervous system, all involuntary responses. The dog is not thinking. There's no logical thought. The dog is just responding to how they feel with whatever they have seen or heard. Let's say they pull away and you jerk the lead. What is the dog learning? Okay, so I'm going to either, as you mentioned earlier, Linda, going into learned helplessness, reactive or avoidance behaviors, because that promotes survival, right? I need to survive in this instance, but the lead restricts my ability to disengage from this perceived threat. I don't know what to do. And then the behaviors just amplify, or they go to the point where the dog's just like, no, the best chance of survival is like a deer in the headlights. I'm just going to freeze and be still and not move. And then with regarding your point, Jessica, with denying that affection, that will in my opinion, the dog will not connect your response to their behavior over something so complex. My dog toilets in the house because they're upset with me because I left them, so I'm not going to talk to them too for a little bit. But what may have happened previously is that the dog has learned the behavior of toileting in front of you is what makes you upset, or you become unsafe and unpredictable. So the dog is incredibly conflicted. So now the dog will go and hide where you can't see them to eliminate. But then you go outside and they go, well, I've been outside. This dog still is not toileting, but because that associative learning happened prior, you are unsafe to do this in front of. Now I come back, now you've toileted in the house, now, you know, you're upset with me, I'm upset with you. And the dog's going, I don't know what you want.
Yeah, which is a perfect segue into saying one of the most, and this is, Who's a Good Dog is about dogs, but it's really about human emotions, because it's our human emotional responses to our dog are so complex too. And often, I mean, in your example, our dogs, and I think it's important to recognize this, our dogs make us angry. They make us frustrated and impatient, and understanding where that's coming from for us too. But when we have that kind of emotional reaction to something that our dog is doing, to take a pause, a strategic pause, think about why, take a breath so that you can kind of manage the emotion. And like for me and my dog Bella, it's barking. She doesn't bark frequently, which I'm glad of. But she does have some barking patterns, like when she's really excited, we're about to go out for a walk. She goes for walks in her stroller because she's quite disabled. She loves her walks in her stroller, and she barks and barks and barks and barks when we're on the way out, and it's grating, and it kind of like
scrambles your brain.
It makes my blood pressure. But it's not, she's excited. So I just take a pause and say, you know, take a breath, be a Buddhist, and, you know, don't, you know, just notice the emotion, but try not to get too stuck in it. And I think so much of our, especially with training, because it's kind of about getting our dog to do what we want.
Yeah.
And when they don't, there's a lot of room there for getting frustrated and angry. And often a dog is just dogs are trying to please us. They're trying to work with us as best they can. We're really hard to understand. We don't communicate very clearly. We often are really ambivalent. We might be communicating one thing with our hand and another thing with our mouth, and a third thing with our face, and a fourth thing with our voice.
Body language. Yeah.
My dog is like, what the heck? What am I supposed to do?
And inconsistencies between family members and everyone as well. But I just want to go back to what we were talking about with regards to being a partner, a teammate with them, rather than we're on the same side as them, because we want to sort of read between the lines and tune into their body language, their energy, any subtle shifts, so that we can recognize when they're nearing their thresholds and make sure that we're stepping in before that reaction happens, or whatever it is that is going to tip them over. We want to make sure that we're protecting their emotional safety and minimizing going over threshold. And what we're not going to be doing is asking them to push through any fears that they're feeling.
Agreed, yes.
We don't want to sort of force them into a situation to face their fears, so to speak. But we also want to make sure that we're always offering choices, and what we were saying about agency and autonomy with safe boundaries. Obviously, they are living in a human world, and you know, there are cars that go fast and things that we have to make sure that we're protecting them. But having predictable environments where there are even small choices over whether or not to interact, so that is their choice, that's not forced on them, and making sure that they've got natural outlets, natural behavior outlets, so that they're able to to be themselves without fear of being, I like the word squished. their emotional squish.
Yes.
Because that choice is really going to be empowering for them, and knowing that they were able to make a choice and you supported their choice and you heard them and you listened to them.
And
Linda,
dogs should be able to say no.
Yeah, absolutely. And we should respect their decision to say no.
And even to opt out of training, I think. I don't know. You as trainers might have a different feeling about that, but I think if a dog doesn't want to do it, don't.
No, absolutely.
Never force.
Never.
There are so many things in dog training that are task oriented, and that there's really no purpose for the dog to learn, and often not really for the human. It's ego grounded. It's root, some trainer told you got to teach these behaviors. What Joe touched on, enrichment and allowing dogs to perform genetically natural behaviors, scavenging, snip faries, let them decide where to go on a walk. Why not?
Yes.
Why do we always have to be the rulers?
Yeah.
What Emily touched on about what happens when the dog barks and lunges out of a perceived threat, and then we yank on the leash, because it's just so sad, because the dog is telling us that they feel threatened, and then we punish them. We punish them for behaving in a way that protects their physical and emotional safety. And someone in my group recently said, a balance trainer will say to a dog, I'm going to punish you, and it's your fault that I'm going to punish you. And that's kind of the place that, with all this confusion that we're creating,
absolutely,
it's their fault. No, it's not. Where does this come from? And we really need to take responsibility, as I said, to stop this animal abuse, like masquerading as dog training. I kind of try to bridge that gap between research trainers and pet parents. And just one example I wanted to give very briefly was another case that came to mind, where a dog was doing something adaptive to survival. It was afraid of the man of the house, probably by association, fear conditioning from a previous man of the house. And the mom called me, and she was just distraught. She said, Layla, every time she sees my husband, she growls at him and she runs outside. And we rescued her, and we don't know what to do. And I ended up, she had the same reaction to me, a stranger coming into the home. So I ended up, having, lying flat on the floor on my stomach with my hands out with high value food, just, after, assessing that she would like food, and to give her a chance in her own space and time to get near enough to me to take the food, and then I could transfer that to the pet dad. And a couple weeks later, I get a call like, "Oh, they're just so in love," and nothing beats that feeling when you just take the time to learn to listen first, to learn a little bit about how to take baby steps and desensitize and go slow, and then go slower. It's like magic can happen.
Yeah. And I think also encouraging people who live with dogs to learn as much as they can about what it's like to be a dog. Canine senses, how do dogs experience the world? How their noses work? Dogs are much more olfactory oriented than we are, and we see the world through our eyes, and they really see the world through their noses. And which is why it's so important to let them sniff when they're sniffing on a walk rather than getting annoyed. Like my dog is lollygagging again. Just say, oh, my dog is interacting with the world and reading the sidewalk or whatever it is. And that, whenever there's a behavior that might be annoying or problematic, trying to, I guess, put that in the context of natural canine behaviors. We've had that phrase come up a few times. And, understanding that may be something that dogs need to do, like to do, naturally do.
Yeah.
And like coming back to the example of barking, which I used before, I think many people and many training programs seem like they want to just stop dogs from barking ever.
Yeah.
But barking
can't do that.
And barking is something that's how dogs are
communicating.
Natural communication. Yep.
Yeah. And so when people are going back to human emotional responses to dogs, what I encourage people to do if their dog is barking and it's annoying, maybe making their blood pressure go up, to step back and become curious about it. And this is where we might throw in the phrase ethogram. Make an ethogram of dog barking, or your dog barking in particular, because every dog's barking is unique. And how many different barks can you hear your dog making? 15. And what are they trying to say to you or to another dog or another creature altogether with those barks? And so if you get curious about them and observant of them,
you can address them
maybe
so much better. Absolutely.
To be annoyed, but yeah, and more able to collaborate with your dog on a solution that works for both of you.
Yeah.
And maybe the neighbors. Yeah.
100%. So we're coming to the end of our time already. I know this is something that we could, could we maybe stretch it out a bit?
15 more minutes, please, Mum.
If we just go around the virtual table and maybe just share one simple thing that a listener could maybe do this week to start to support their dog emotionally. Emily, do you want to start?
So it's that definitely, Jessica, what you were saying, and Linda as well, it's that understanding that emotion, what the dog is communicating, not just to you, but to themselves or anything around them, whether it's pulling on the lead or barking.
One thing.
I'm trying. It's so hard. So I'll do, because it's the same thing for both scenarios. So it depends on the intensity and the level of the dog's behavioral response, right? So if the dog is hiding or cowering, or we've got excessive barking, the dog is in a distress state, right? Either way, the dog needs to come out of the situation. So because stress inhibits learning, not one individual can retain information trying to be taught when they're stressed because of cortisol levels. So when the dog is distressed, first and foremost, that to me is emergency management. Take your dog out of the situation, help them feel safe. Safe reduces the cortisol, increases dopamine and serotonin and all these things that we're helping or working towards, and the bonding of oxytocin as well. Once you've done that, you can identify the problem you have. And as a quick solution until you find the appropriate person to help you with these struggles, there is a beautiful force, Fear-Free Happy Homes. I'll give you, you probably already know it, Joe. It is a video on body language and communication that Fear-Free Happy Homes has made a cartoon. Someone's done sketches and then actual footage of dogs' body language, and it's for the whole family. It is so easy to learn and understand, because if you can identify the body language, you can identify, my dog is not coping. We need to get out of here. We'll deal with that later. But right now you need to be safe. And when you go out, you see that thing that the dog is not happy with, cross the road. Just as a bandage until you find that help. If the dog is barking, go, oh, All right, thanks for letting me know. Come, manage the environment, close the door to prevent them from rehearsing the behavior, redirect them with enrichment. You're not reinforcing the bark. The bark has already been and gone. You're using emergency management to take the dog out of the situation that's causing them distress. Then you worry about the rest later.
Well done. Yeah, I've popped the link in the
Oh, thank you.
in
You're
the
so fast.
I can't even think of the word. My mind is so like, oh my goodness.
The bottom comments.
Comments, thank you. Linda, what would you say one thing that anyone listening might be able to start implementing this week?
Well, something really easy. I would say that to observe your dog very closely, what your dog looks like when you walk in the house. And notice, what your dog looks like when you put down like a high value food bowl. Look at that body language. And if you see anything other than that or completely neutral, something's probably wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, avoiding, as Emily said, avoiding first getting, creating distance, not putting our dogs into flooding situations where they're going to go over thresholds. But I'm not going to keep talking for too long. But on the other side, ask what the problem behavior to us. What is the dog trying to tell you with that behavior? Whether it's barking, whether it's urinating, and the example that Emily gave about, where should I pee? Where is it okay to pee? And just a quick nuts and bolts tip, one of my all-time favorite things that I discovered about house training was after doing a thorough cleanup with a bioenzymatic cleaner and a black light, if you lay down food and you do scattering over what was a toilet and turn it into a dinner table, you can have some amazing success with house training. Just follow. Yeah, Joe. I was like, hey, I wonder if it was like, yeah, it can work for marking as well. So anyway, on that nuts and bolts of, basic training. So yeah, just recognize what's happy, and then what's not happy, stop.
Brilliant. And Jessica?
So I guess I'll say I have a million options, but
it's so hard.
because life can feel hard, I'm going to focus on joy.
Love
and
it.
dog joy. My challenge would be make a joy journal for your dog and write down the things that you already know or think bring your dog joy. And it might be a really exuberant kind of joy, like just running all out at the dog park or all out at the park, just letting loose. Or it could be a really kind of quiet joy of just like laying on the porch and sniffing what's happening. And you know it when you see it. But so make the joy list and make sure that your dog gets at least one good joy session a week, maybe even a day. But let's just go with a week to make it not too oppressive. And, see if you can add things to the list.
Love that.
So
That's
good.
Brilliant. We said that at the same time.
And it makes us happy too. If I'm feeling down, I just go stand outside the dog park and watch the dogs play. And they're so joyful. And it makes me feel better instantly.
Yeah, and that's the point, right? We all do things, even as humans, we seek out things that bring us joy. Give your dog that option too.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think mine would be to get a post-it note or a piece of paper and stick it somewhere with how can I give my dog more choice, and just think about
on
that
the fridge.
every time you walk past that post-it note, so all the family members or anyone in the household can see it. How can I give my dog more choice? And just start thinking so that then you can start shifting your thinking away from any behaviour that the dog may be displaying that isn't what you'd like, to how can you give it other options. So could you redirect that behaviour onto something else? Could you use distraction? Could you maybe consider giving them more choice over what toys they have available, what walking route, like Linda said, the sniff where they want to go? How can you give them more choice? And then just every time you walk past it, just think on that.
Oh, love that.
So we are already over time, and I know we could talk all night, all day, wherever you are. I think I can speak on behalf of both of us when I say a massive thank you to Jessica.
Oh, thank you so
Yeah,
much for your
pleasure to
time
be
and joining us. This has been so good. Thank
We've
you so
totally been
much.
fangirling, haven't we? But we are super grateful to you both for joining. Next episode, next week, we have got the wonderful Stephanie Zickman joining us. Linda actually introduced me to Stephanie, so I'm super grateful to Linda for the
Amazing.
introduction.
Thanks, Linda.
Yeah, thank you so much. Stephanie is known as the holistic dog groomer. And when we're talking about choice and shut down on the grooming table and all that kind of not listening to the emotions, Stephanie is the one that's going to be able to give us more of an insight into that. She's a real thought leader in animal welfare, and she combines her traditional experience in grooming with holistic wellness practices. And she is the director of the Holistic Grooming Academy, if you want to go
That is
check her out.
amazing.
Yeah, super excited for next week's episode. If you've joined us live and you've enjoyed this, or if you're listening on replay, please do share with whoever is in your network. Hit the share button and let other people know we're here. We would love for you to hit the subscribe button as well. And we will look forward to seeing you same time next week. Thanks a lot from all of us. Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Dog Expert Podcast, the podcast dogs would want you to listen to. If you've enjoyed this episode, do come and let us know in our free Facebook group for dog lovers everywhere, Ethical Dog Training with Canine Principles. That way we can make more content like this that you'll love. We would love for you to leave a review on here and hit subscribe so that you never miss an episode.